But will he guarantee air cover? Donald Trump surprising Ukraine and NATO allies with an apparent about-face on Russia. This at the annual opening of the United Nations General Assembly in New York. We'll ask why the U.S. president suddenly thinks Kyiv can win militarily. The same Trump who up to now blamed both sides equally for the war, and most recently assured that Russian drones fired into Poland might have been a mistake. We'll also ask what concrete steps to expect for Ukraine and for also frontline NATO members like former Soviet state Estonia after last weekend's 12-minute violation of its tiny airspace by Russian MiG fighter jets. It goes beyond the eastern flank. Major European airports hit by ransomware attacks, mystery drone flights. The hand of Moscow? Now, there's no firm evidence yet, but with Washington's wavering, it really doesn't take much to fuel the anxiety these days on this continent. Going forward, what is Europe's plan? How much can and does it depend on the United States? Today in the France 24 debate, we're asking about that apparent about-face by the U.S. president. With us, former NATO General Michel Yakovlev, professor at Sciences Po's Paris School of International Affairs.
Good evening.
Welcome back to the show. We've often had him by video link from Kyiv. Peter Zalmayev, director of the Eurasia Democracy Initiative. Good to see you in the flesh. Irina Krasnoshtan, program director at the advocacy group International Center for Ukrainian Victory. You share your time, you say, between Warsaw and Kyiv. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for the invitation.
And former France 24 correspondent in Georgia's capital, Régis Janté, author in French of Our Man in Washington about Donald Trump's relations over the years with Russia. Thanks for joining. More than decades, exactly. Reminder, if you're on the go, you can listen to the show wherever podcasts are streamed. For the U.S. President, Vladimir Putin now looks like a, quote, paper tiger, stating on Truth Social that Russia has been fighting aimlessly for 3.5 years, a war that should have taken a real military power, capital letters, less than a week to win. And after sideline meetings with his Ukrainian and French counterparts, a starkly different tone from Trump.
We settled 7 wars. The biggest disappointment, but I think that'll happen eventually, is the Ukraine and Russia situation. But we've settled. I thought that was going to be the easiest one because of my relationship with Putin, but unfortunately that's relationship didn't mean anything, unfortunately.
All right, so Régis Janté there. I thought it was going to be the easiest one because of my relationship with Putin, said Donald Trump. Is it personal pique? What were those statements we had in New York? What's this all about?
It says about his vision of the world, and he thinks it's enough to be friends with Mr. Putin just to erase the geopolitics, just to erase the history, just to erase what Russia is about. But indeed, it starts to be difficult for Mr. Putin, for Mr. Trump to deal with Ukraine at the moment. He realized the principle of reality is back, I would say, and now he has to admit that he can't do it. That Mr. Putin goes in the other direction that he wants to, and he has to try to make some pressure. So I think what happened yesterday, what he said yesterday, basically aims at putting some pressure on Mr. Putin. Very mild, I would say, but still
very mild.
Very mild, because it's so far, it's only words. And since 4 or 5 months, we hear that I will put some sanctions, more sanctions on Russia, and so on. But it doesn't do anything. So far, there is no real decision made to really force Mr. Putin to come to the table of the negotiations. And so far, it's only words.
So far, it's only words.
But it says something that indeed is changing potentially in the mind of Mr. Trump, but we are far yet from any results.
All right, so not a 180-degree, but perhaps movement. Do you agree, Michel Yakovlev?
I'd like to agree. As Jesus Christ himself said, you judge a tree by its fruit. Mm-hmm. Until now, until tonight, there is not one single act in Trump, both as a candidate and then as a president-elect and then as president in action, that would be considered detrimental to Putin. Not one single act of his presidency has been detrimental to Putin, whereas you'll find a great number of acts which are positively in support of Putin. So it may be that the rhetoric has changed and that the acts will come. But until then, I don't take him at his words, I take him at his deeds, and until now, it's zero.
So let me ask you, because there's a domestic calculus always for any world leader. He had Republican hawks who rushed to congratulate him on the fact that he spoke, used tough words against Vladimir Putin. But he also has isolationists to contend with. Can Donald Trump do a 180-degree turn?
I doubt it. It's not in his nature. And by the way, his nature...
Is he beholden to...
It's not that he's beholden. He's very emotional. He loves Putin and he loathes Zelensky since a few years ago. I think it's very personal. There's one he loves and the other he hates. Mm-hmm. It's not strategy.
All right. Volodymyr Zelensky giving the impression that he's no longer hated quite so much. Has Christmas come early for Ukraine's president? He stayed on message in that speech he gave before the General Assembly of the UN earlier. It was before that a morning appearance on Fox News. And just after Trump blasted Russia on Tuesday, here's what his reaction.
President Trump, during phone conversations or dialogue, yes, he always said that, look, in autumn they will occupy it, we need to do something, and etc. And then one by one he understood that Putin is just sharing some information which is far away of a real situation on the battlefield, far away of truth. And of course, then when now he trusts much more bigger to me.
It's always a dangerous game putting words into Donald Trump's mouth. How did Volodymyr Zelensky do in that particular sequence?
Well, Zelensky's really learned the ropes. Of course, after that baptism by fire we witnessed a few months ago in the Oval Office, right? I mean, whatever doesn't break you makes you stronger. He's learned, his ways. He's donned that jacket, still no tie, but he's getting there, of course. But all jokes aside, this is a clever strategy by the Ukrainians just to sort of play along with Trump, but also to try to co-opt, not coerce, but co-opt him into this sort of position. Of course, using the general background that Donald Trump is obviously made to look weak by Vladimir Putin, and his wife, Melania, has made it clear that she's not happy with it, and he's actually broadcast her views of that. So there is a certain momentum now in the House, both bipartisan. I'm talking about a bill by Lindsey Graham and Senator Kennedy, a conservative stalwart from Louisiana, if I'm not mistaken, to confiscate Russia's frozen sovereign wealth assets. It's controversial. Measure. And the French president actually commented on that. He said that this will be detrimental to our banking, to the trust of our financial system. Well, Americans are actually more gung-ho about this. Well, probably because the Americans don't control much of that money. Most of it is in European financial institutions. But be that as it may, Donald Trump, I think there is hope that he will be coming around to that position. But also, let me just say very quickly, if we were to give more credit to Donald Trump, and if there's some kind of a vision thing here in this post, that he may be creating some wiggle room for himself to once again walk away from this war, which he calls Biden's war, because in that post he's once again putting the burden on the Europeans. You do all of these things, you slap sanctions on China and India, you stop this minute buying Russian oil and gas, and this then is a hard sell, of course. For Europe to do it right away is a very difficult task.
Especially if you have countries like Hungary and Slovakia still importing Russian hydrocarbons.
The leaders of which are both Trump simpaticos, Trump allies.
To think that just before Trump's post there on Truth Social, his Secretary of State told the UN Security Council that this was, quote, a war that cannot end militarily. It will end at a negotiating table. A lot of the comments from the U.S. press this morning was that Trump kind of pulled the rug out from under Marco Rubio. Rubio, who, by the way, later meets with his Russian counterpart, Sergei Lavrov. After all, that's what the United Nations is for, diplomacy. But your thoughts on this, Irina Krasnoshtan? What is there movement? Is there something happening?
Well, first of all, I wanted to also highlight one crucial element in what Donald Trump said. And for the first time, I think, since he was elected, he chose to write the word victory. I mean, he didn't write the word victory. He wrote Ukraine can win this war. And I think this is really important moment because even before the US strategy towards this war has never been to actually achieve the Ukrainian victory. And of course, we will still need to see whether these words transform into any deeds. But even there is like quite a shift because, as you mentioned, even his state secretary before said otherwise. And we cannot forget that just less than a month ago, Trump was kind of trying to push this deal on Ukraine in which Ukraine would be giving up some of the territories to Russia. So saying that Ukraine can win and actually recover all the territories is quite a shift in the statement.
Is this a gradual process or is this just a whim?
Well,
I just bashed the UN in my speech before the General Assembly. I think I'll balance it now with some nice words about Ukraine.
Yes and no, because of course we know that Trump can change his mind quite fast, and we cannot guarantee that this would be the same assessment in a week or two. But I think that he had some of the updates on the military situation on Ukraine, maybe from Ukrainian intelligence as well as from American intelligence, and maybe he's coming to the realization that Russia is actually not winning this war, something that probably Putin kept telling him. And it's not the reality on the ground.
And Donald Trump does not like weakness, Régis Janté. In fact, we did an interview, we'll hear a little clip from it later with the French president. First thing he says is, Russia is weaker than we thought. And it seemed almost like he was saying this for Donald Trump.
And this is what the news of the last days are showing. For example, the pocket, let's say, of Pokrovsk was about to be won, as the Russians said like months ago, and finally we see that now the Ukrainian forces are taking back it and holding the place. So the victories on the ground from Russia are really little in reality, and probably he knows that. But I think it's a bit more on the American side and what's going on around Mr. Trump. Mr. Trump didn't change. Indeed, I agree with you, absolutely. He didn't change, and he will probably won't change because he loves the big powers, he hates the democracies and so on. So he's very eager to help Mr. Putin. But Mr. Putin doesn't help him at all. And this is why he has a deception, because he needs some support, some steps, even if they are symbolic from Mr. Putin, but he doesn't have not a single one so far. And Mr. Trump has also an opinion, has also some elections coming. Of course, he will probably manage to deal with it, but still, for him, he needs, to show that he's holding in front of Mr. Putin. And for example, the American opinion is not pro-Putin. It's more pro-Ukrainian at the moment. And the election is not only with the MAGA electorate, but with the whole Americans. So it's quite important. And there is also the administration, and there is the reality, as I said. And that's why probably, at least on the speech, the words level is there is a switch. Indeed, there is a shift, but it doesn't say indeed we don't see any deeds for so far.
Meanwhile, those little incidents that keep Europeans on edge, well, they continue. The Spanish military jet with Defense Minister Margarita Robles on board experiencing a GPS disturbance earlier as it flew near Russia's Kaliningrad exclave on its way to Lithuania. The incident reminiscent of the GPS jamming experienced by the European Commission president on a plane ride to Bulgaria recently. Of much greater concern, the recent drone interceptions in Poland, NATO's first firing at Russian weaponry since the Cold War, and that 12 minutes spent in Estonian airspace last weekend by 3 Russian MiGs who ignored warnings by Italian NATO jets. Poland's prime minister suggesting his country would shoot down Russian planes that violate its airspace going forward. Now, in that exclusive interview with France 24 and Radio France International, France's president asked about that.
The objective over what Russia is doing, as I see it, is to tell us, you want to support Ukraine, you want security guarantees, I'm signalling with these incursions that you should worry about your own defence. It's important to react quickly, which is what we've done. We need to enhance our posture, commit more resources, which is what France has done. And if there are further provocations, to take things up a notch, because that's what Russia will have decided to do, and I don't think it's in their interest.
Take it up a notch. We tried to press him a little bit. He said, I don't want to go into political fiction, kept his cards close to his chest, which is normal. Michel Yakovlev, I suppose, if you're trying to speak the language of deterrence, as they called it during the Cold War. Was that the right message to be sending to Moscow?
I suppose so.
Suppose so.
Yes. I'm not sure. I don't live in their mind. I've never been to Russia, so I'll remain humble in that respect. The Russians are doing now. The drones flying into Poland. That's outright aggression under any law. End of story. Even if they didn't have ammunition, it's only once they've landed that you know if they explode or not. You know, that kind of stuff. Now the flights. It's provocation. It's cheating with the border. It's not good news. It's done on purpose at the right moment. The GPS is another story because Kaliningrad is jamming GPS to defend itself, to protect itself from Ukrainian drones. So we would probably do the same. So none of these, other than the drones, are close to threshold of actually killing people, downing aircraft. We're not there yet. Part of the picture of all these provocations over the last 10 days are meant, in my view, to conceal the fact that Zapad, the big exercise...
This was a joint military exercise with Belarus.
Yes, it was supposed to be 100,000 men. It's a damp squib, at most 15,000. Of whom 2,000 Russians and Belarus. Zapad is basically a non-event. How do you hide a non-event? Well, you play fireworks, and you annoy everyone, and you do nasty things. Okay, but that's where we are now. It's nasty things.
Do you agree with that, Peter?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I would just broaden that. I think it's also a way to piggyback on Trump's post about how this is not distinguishing Russia, right? Paper tiger. They can't defeat the smaller Ukraine. This is a way for Putin to broaden this conflict. Like, we're not fighting with Ukraine. We're fighting with the whole of NATO, right? That kind of in advance justifies all the setbacks in this and why people expected Ukraine to fall within 3 to 7 business days. 3.5 years later, they're still there, fighting over Pokrovsk, right? Having not captured a single major administrative city. And also, of course, you're probably familiar with this other idea, and I think it's very plausible. Vladimir Putin, of course, wants to embolden right-wing, or maybe, as the case may be, extreme left parties that are against supporting Ukraine into basically, a more active stance. We need to stand down. If we don't, Putin will, bring the war to us. So this is a scare tactic.
It's a scare tactic. Irina Krasnoshtan, you were telling us before we went on air, that night of September 9th to the 10th, it was over 6.5 hours that those drones fell into Polish territory. You were on a night train from Warsaw to Kyiv?
Yes, I was on a night train. Basically, it's Warsaw to Helm, and then from Helm to Kyiv. And this was the night of the attack, of course, over Ukraine as well. So the air alerts were on this whole night, and the Russian drones and missiles flying into Ukrainian airspace, and in addition to that, flying into Polish airspace as well. And I would like to kind of enter a little bit in the discussion here, because I think that on one hand, Yes, Zapad, I understand the connection, but I would not fully agree on that because Russia has been doing these things for a while and it looks like they are slowly but surely escalating. Because, for example, with the drones have already been flying in the NATO states' territory, but the quantity of drones this time was much higher. So 20 drones is more than 1 or 2 random drones that you can say that they are random, but 20, it's already kind of a targeted attack. And then, there were already Russian air jets appearing in the NATO airspace in the past, even in the spring in Estonia over the Baltic Sea. And this time there are 3, and then what happens if there are more? So I think that step by step, I know it's a gradual process between, NATO leadership, political and military, but I think that at certain point of time, the decision would need to be taken about the possibility to actually shoot these things down. The same how it happened with the shooting down of Russian drones over the Polish territory.
So there's a lot of anxiety here. We're far from the front lines in Paris. Is it, as Peter Zamayev was saying, simply a scare tactic? Or is this a dry run? Do you really think that Russia would try to encroach upon the Baltic states on NATO territory and try to invade?
I think that Russia is kind of pushing the red lines on your side, actually, in this way. So they are, as I'm saying, increasing the intensity.
There's a contradiction here, I'm sorry. We've spent the first part of the discussion saying how, look, the Russians, they can't even take more than 20% of Ukraine's territory. They're losing ground in the last week. And now we're saying they could invade?
So let me just clarify a few things, because we're talking about different things. On the drones, I mean, Russia has been quite successful, I'm sorry to say. You can see it even in Ukraine, because the drone production, it's rather not expensive technology, so they are able to scale them up, and they have been sending even like 800 drones over Ukraine. So imagine if similar quantity could be targeted on a NATO member state. So we are talking about different things, because we are saying about, the land operation that is not very successful on Ukrainian front lines, but still Russia has a capacity, of course, to send 10 or 20 or maybe even more drones on NATO member states' territory.
Of course, Michel Yakovlev, the scare tactic works in so much as when after the night of September 9th to the 10th, there were reports on French television about how France, for instance, has an air and drone command center located near the city of Lyon. But it's true that what Irina says, that it's not up to speed when you look at what Russia can do.
Yeah, and I agree with Irina that much as I poo-poo the things, they are escalatory. And it is a scare tactic that Putin is cranking up. Now, and by the way, a number of drones, I suspect, were intercepted by Ukraine. It's not all the ones that the Russians sent that actually fell in Poland. I suspect a number of them were blasted or diverted, jammed or whatever in Ukraine. Now, no Western nation has the density of defense that, no Western in Europe, sorry, I'm not talking of Israel, but has the density of defense that there is in Ukraine now, and the practice of defense. And we need to do something to break the cycle of escalation. Hence, there's been proposal made for Sky Shield, that a number of air forces are. Personally, I
explain what Sky Shield is for our viewers.
Sky Shield would be a joint coalition of the willing, in a sense, endeavor to extend air operations into not NATO, but coalition air operations over half, basically, the Ukrainian airspace. We'd take charge of that, a coalition of the willing, which would enable the Ukrainians to focus all their assets on the front line, so it would increase their density. And by being 200 kilometers away from the Russians, it would put the Russians on the onus of, do you actually want to attack NATO aircraft operating over Ukraine?
And would the United States agree to that?
They'd let us do it. That's the plan. Now, the plan is not agreed. We're not there yet, and so on. That is trying trying to push it, it would turn the tables on Putin. And by the way, with the series of escalatory actions, we have a good reason to tell Putin, okay, you've messed up with our lives enough. We are fed up. We're going to do something that you surely don't like, just as we don't like what you've been up to. And we would do Sky Shield. Perfectly legal. We are operating at the request of a sovereign state over its own territory. It's a non-issue, legally speaking.
Just 2 cents, if I may, on this, because one important element to add to that is that actually Ukraine in this part will also be a contributor, because on one hand we would be having some support from the Western countries in hardware, but on the other hand, we would be able to share our knowledge and know-how, and especially related to the drones and technologies. So it would be also the possibility for the Europeans to learn from us on how to, operate in this drone warfare, and then having the equipment and support in air from them.
Régis Janté, you know what a Russian invasion looks like.
No, I think...
Are you expecting?
No, but what we know for sure is that Russia wants to destroy the NATO alliance, of course. And it's probably a way also to test it, of course, at the time where NATO has never been so weak, of course, because of the position of Mr. Trump. So I think it's a way to do it, to see what is it. And in the meantime, to send a signal, of course, to everyone. You see, we can destabilize the NATO members. I remember back in 2014 when the war started in Ukraine, that already among the specialists of Russia, we said that probably this would evaluate in a kind of crisis where we would not know that it is exactly an aggression, something that everybody in Europe would discuss about, is it an aggression, is it not, just to make NATO weaker without attacking directly NATO. And because Russia fears NATO, we should be clear on that. I think also what is important is for Russia a way also to test what we are able to do, who is responding, with which kind of defense and so on. So that's important. And the third dimension is what you just spoke about, Peter, is the Polish dimension, which is not the most important, but quite important, because it plays in Poland what also happens everywhere in Europe. You have a right and conservative side, in this case, which is more reluctant to support Ukraine, while the liberals, the prime minister, is more to support Ukraine and more to be directly against Russia. So it's a way also to divide somehow the Polish...
Speech by the Polish president at the UN, very forceful, though.
Sure. But there is the Polish president, which was more on the right side, of course, conservative side, but the opinion is still divided.
All right.
So it was maybe not the first aim of Russia in this, but we have to see that it plays, and what plays in Poland can play in France, can play in Germany, can play everywhere. Should we confront Russia or not?
All right, maybe we can call up again that map of that Russian flyover last Saturday, those MiG-31 fighter jets that, by the way, were eventually escorted out of Estonian airspace. Here's the map. That was the map showing Kaliningrad. There, here we have. So, Peter Zalmayev. All right. So first, when you look at the map, first thing you see is the Baltic Sea is a crowded place. But more importantly, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, former Soviet states, as is Georgia, where you used to work, Régis Janté. Is it about greater Russia for Vladimir Putin at this point? Is he still thinking he can reconstitute the Soviet Union?
I've been saying that in my various comments on this. Yeah, he is about securing his place in history right now. He's compared himself to Peter the Great. He's not about enriching himself. He's got all the money in the world now, right? So he is about entering history books. And this restoration of the Soviet Union will not take place the same way, right? We're not talking about the same 15 republics being brought under the same umbrella, under the same flag, anthem, right? It's probably, it's safe to say that the 3 Baltic states are probably gone for Russia, right? But there's still sizable Russian-speaking and ethnic Russian populations there, including in Estonia, the city of Narva, that is just separated by a river from Russia. I mean,
From Kaliningrad.
Yes.
No,
no,
not
on the
Kaliningrad,
other
from,
side.
Oh, the other side, excuse me.
On the road to
Kaliningrad,
St.
and
Petersburg.
Kaliningrad sits like very inconveniently for Putin, with Lithuania separating it from the mainland, the
there we go.
Suwalki corridor, and the Russian long-held dream of connecting it with the, and that's another potential hotspot, etc. But there is a lot of resentment to milk for Putin on the part of his citizenry, who feel that these Baltic states are ungrateful. The Soviets liberated them, but by definition, I mean, to them, Soviets means Russian. From the Germans, they have to be grateful. So that really sells with the public, and of course the demontage of monuments to Russian soldiers in Tallinn, and all of that, of course, plays really well with the public. But Vladimir Putin, feels that this is the weak spot of the alliance, where he will test this collective security agreement, Chapter 5 of NATO. He imagines some hybrid scenario whereby the Russians of Narva demand the Estonian People's Republic or something of the like, And like you said, yes, it's very hard to believe there will be Russian tanks rolling over into NATO's territory. But there's all these other ways where Putin can show that this Article 5 no longer works, or maybe never worked in the first place.
And let's not forget that it's not only about Baltics, because we've seen just recently what happened in Oslo airport and in Copenhagen. So it's sort of like a reminder that I'm here and, from Putin.
But you heard General Yakovlev saying the jamming of the Spanish defense minister's plane, that's also just because they're jamming all the devices near Kaliningrad. We don't have firm proof yet that it's the Russians when it comes to Oslo and Copenhagen airport, or those cyber attacks that took place in London, Berlin, and Brussels over the weekend.
But, Russians has always used this, like, that's not us, but I remember 2014 in Crimea and, this little green man, and Russia claiming that, these are not Russians and so on. So, we should not take Russian word that these are not their drones for real.
Yeah, I doubt the drones of 2 days ago over Oslo and Copenhagen. They don't come from Senegal or Papua New Guinea. So whether we have evidence one day where they came from, actually it's a bit irrelevant, since all of us have said basically it's you. We take it that it's you. We should take it as the political fact is that we believe it's you. Whether we have evidence, we don't care that much.
And the drones going the other way as well, Peter Zamayev. And this was something that was brought up by some at the United Nations in New York. The most recent example, Gazprom confirming that the Salavat petrochemical complex has been hit. So Ukraine's answering in kind with this drone warfare.
Yeah, indeed, and that's the only way to go. I mean, we are engaged in a struggle with a foe that's many times bigger, outmatches us in manpower, etc. The only way to go is with an asymmetrical warfare to really make it hurt for Vladimir Putin, going after these oil refineries. This is also something that also probably plays very well with Donald Trump. He's seen the evidence, and I think that also played a role, in his decision to write what he wrote recently.
Again, I get back to you, Régis Janté, because you wrote that book about the relationship between Trump and Russia. He likes Russia because it's got a strong leader, and so therefore Peter's correct that if it doesn't seem so strong, he's not that enamored with it.
Yeah, but he will never see Ukraine as a big power, so then it would be always difficult for Kyiv. I think there are three main reasons why Mr. Trump is so mild, I would say, with Mr. Putin. One is the 40 years of history between the Soviet Union, the KGB and the Soviet Union, then the FSB of Russia, which cultivated. He was not an agent, but he was cultivated with a lot of money, dozens of millions of dollars going through his businesses, especially when he was about to bankrupt and so on, in his casinos, in his real estate project. So that's important. And we have, of course, we don't have the full...
But why would they give him money at a time when he wasn't even a political candidate?
Because they bet on him.
They knew he would run for president? Nobody knew till 2015.
No, we knew from 87. From 87, Trump said, I could be a good candidate for the Republicans. He said that. And at the time, in 87, because he made his first trip to Moscow in July 87, at the time, even in Moscow, there were some few people who were saying he would be a good president. I read the articles at the time. And you had the same with some people like pro-Soviet or having some relation with Soviet Union in Washington, which were saying this, he would be a good president, and in Moscow, they like him very much. So that's one part. This is important. He's not a puppet, but he's someone who has been cultivated. They call it a confidential contact. This is how the KGB at the time was calling this kind of person. So not an agent as you are paid to bring back some intelligence, but just you help him. The second reason is, why did they do so? They did so because Trump, by himself, not because of the Russians, by his vision of the world, his vision of politics, the fact that he loved the power, the big powers, has no big love for democracy and so on, makes him to come closer to Russia, to try to get a relation with Russia.
So to Peter's point, if it's not so big now, the power, if those drone strikes on oil refineries are working.
It would be difficult to change his mind, because since 40 years he thinks that Russia is a big power. In 84, for example, he tried to impose himself as the top negotiator for the Reagan administration for the disarmament, the nuclear disarmament between the big powers. And when you look at what he said at the time, you understand that he was really trying to get some agreement, or propose some agreement between Soviet Union and the US, which was very comfortable for Moscow. While the small powers, as Pakistan or France, he said, we'll just put the pressure on them to be sure that they leave their nuclear power, So this is his vision of the world. And the third reason, I think, is someone, so far at least, who doesn't like the war, and very, very afraid also of a nuclear war. So I think Putin is also feeding him with that permanently.
The fear of
fear of the war,
nuclear war.
And as we understand, but it is between the lines, Mr. Trump thinks that Putin will never give up with Ukraine. So he feels that it is better just to finally to solve the issue at the expense of Ukraine, because otherwise the war would continue, even going to the fatal point, I would say.
All right, Russian state television changing the narrative this Wednesday. There's, if you were channel surfing there, you saw the governor of occupied parts of Zaporizhia reporting to the boss that the roads in the, quote, former Ukraine stank, and that thanks to the president, he's looking forward to state-of-the-art 4-lane highways to the Sea of Azov. And then there's the anchor on state broadcaster Russia 1 dismissing events out of UN headquarters in New York.
Trump diplomacy, loud statements, but what's behind them? The world's news outlets today are studying statements by the US president made on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly in his speech and the following meetings. For example, that Ukraine with EU support can recover lost territories. What is this, a turn towards Kyiv or an attempt to sell more weaponry to Europe?
Does he have a point there? Is it an attempt to sell more weaponry to Europe? He said he wants the Europeans to pay. He wants the Europeans to buy equipment made in the USA.
The reality is that the main beneficiary of this war has been the United States. They are making monkey business out of this war since February 2022. They've forced Europe, the largest market in the world, to turn its back on Russian energy. Now, there's still some left, but we're at the end of the pipeline now. And they've encouraged, and the US have encouraged, forced or whatever, a number of nations to open the taps completely to buy, inter alia, American weaponry. Much as Trump says this is Biden's war, he should actually thank Biden for the current fiscal position and financial position of the United States. They are making monkey business every day out of this war, much more even than China.
So, Peter Zamaev, again, you're visiting here to Paris. What do you think? Do you, when you're here in what is a nuclear power with a military that has bases on several continents, but do you find them weak in comparison to all that we've discussed so far, and particularly the United States? Can there be a European answer to all of this without the U.S.?
there has to be a European answer, and actually, at least rhetorically, the French president has taken the lead on that, right? One of the early voices of the necessity to do that, to step up, because sooner or later, I think the math is such that, Europeans will have to put some troops on the ground, as controversial as it may sound, in Ukraine. Russia is showing that it can actually rely on its allies, the outcasts of this world, such as North Koreans, to put their troops on the ground, up to 15,000, right? Europeans are not willing to do the same. I'm not a huge fan of quoting Russian political figures, including opposition figures, but Mikhail Khodorkovsky, who is known to you probably, he said something very correct a few years ago. He says Russia is actually showing up Europeans and the West for what he believes they are. They've grown decadent, weak, and they've lost all and any appetite for shedding blood for their ideals. And Russia is showing that actually it's worth shedding blood for what you want to achieve. So unless there's that lopsidedness, Vladimir Putin continues to feel confident he will eventually prevail.
Irina Krasnostein, you agree?
I just want to add something to this because I agree that actually...
Are we decadent here?
Well, I agree not on that point. I just wanted to say that, of course, the US has been benefiting in some ways because there was no alternative. There are weapons to which there is no European alternative. But I think what is happening now is actually also opening a window of opportunity for Europe and for European defense production. And most importantly, I would also underline joint cooperation with Ukraine. So there are already some of these initiatives going, but I think there should be more. And, Europeans should also it's a question of speed because some of the production cycles here in Europe are not adapted to these new realities. Ukrainians are much more adapted these days. So we need to take this as an opportunity. And yes, I think that Europe will still be buying some of the American weapons because for some time there would be no possibility to go around it. But I think that the focus should be on strengthening the defense industries of European member states.
Which is the case here in France. It's one of the few items. We don't have a budget yet, even a draft one, because we have a new prime minister and a government that's fallen. But defense is one of the few sectors where there's more money, which is unpopular with many in the opposition.
Yes, in the opposition. In the public, it's quite different. We see that, of course, some people will prefer that the money goes to the healthcare or education or something like this, or the functioning of the administration. But still, we feel that there is some real support within the opinion. And when Mr. Macron, a few months ago, said that, we have to increase the budget up to 3 or 5% even. I mean, there was the weeks later, his ratings were going up. So I think it's quite, people understand the meaning of this war. At the beginning, it was just a war between Russia and Ukraine, and then we understood that it is much more which is at stake. What is at stake is the future of our regimes, the democratic regime, the liberal regimes of Europe. So I think people understand it. I don't say it will be easy, and indeed we promised in France, for example, to increase the production of armament and so on. So far it has been words, but the industry is still not really following, and it's very difficult. We also have to articulate this with the other EU members, and it's of course something which is painful because all the budgets are very strained. But I think we go towards this direction, and this is what is history in the making. The history is not that you build a nice project and then you make it functioning. You always create the big project as Europe in the crisis, and this is what Jean Monnet said. He said that Europe will stand up, will be created in the crisis, and we are exactly in this.
Are the Europeans building the plane while they fly it? Are they at that point, Michel Yakovlev, or is it still talk?
That's a good way of seeing it. Definitely, Ukraine is fighting for Europe, basically. They're doing the fight for us. They are bringing us time and an opportunity to create Europe, what we call the French strategic autonomy, to see Europe as a power as opposed to being only a market. So it's great, and democracies, by the way. So it's a moment of great opportunity, while it's a moment of great suffering and great risk, granted. But ultimately, we are starting in Europe in general to rebuild an industrial base for defense, and to start to realize that we actually have a lot. And the Danes have just bought air defense stuff from Europe, which is at least equivalent to the Patriot.
All right. On that note, we will leave it there, unfortunately, because we have so much more to talk about on this. Michel Yakovlev, I want to thank you. I want to thank Irina Krasnoshtan, Peter Zalmayev, Régis Janté. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.